I have a few quotes that I really like. Pain is the best teacher, but no one wants to go to his class. Yeah. I like to push myself to my limits and try and push myself further than my limits.
My condition is 1 in a million. If it gets into my spine, it could potentially have me in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. But iFly does make me feel free, so I can do whatever I want.
Well, when I first get there and roll around, people will think, oh, he's not going to do much, he's just going to sit there. And then I start diving into ramps and doing all these big tricks, getting air and stuff, so I don't feel any different. I just feel the rush of what I'm doing.
I might have to write a book with you.
Having lived with pain for the first 3 years of her life, I think that's given her so much endurance.
So my name's Ava and I'm 10 years old and I'm actually the youngest black belt in the Kyokushin World Federation.
When Ava was being born, they think that her hips might have been squashed for, you know, maybe 8 hours.
Every time my mum tried to push me out, my hips would bang on the side and it bashed them out of shape, pretty much.
Ava had a lot of trouble sleeping as a baby. The reason was probably because she'd been in constant pain. And when she did start walking, it looked very different to how other kids walk. I was hoping karate would improve her coordination. And there was only one dojo who would take 3-year-olds.
Very serious pace. Oh.
I do a type of karate called Kyokushin, the most difficult and most brutal type of karate.
From Eva, I learned that I can never write anyone off. Before she arrived in the dojo, I will say I didn't give her a chance.
Because I couldn't walk properly, so obviously I was the worst in the class.
Because of her determination, we pushed through. And then, last couple of years, she's doing full contact competitions, and not just doing full contact competitions, she's winning those competitions.
When I would beat the boys, they would start crying. They probably thought girls aren't very strong, and after a little while, they kind of knew I was going to beat them.
So Ava pretty much just turned 10 when she did her black belt grading.
Even allowing her to do it was really hard for me.
It was 9.5 hours. I had to fight 20 black belt adults in a row, and that was very difficult. I really don't know how I did it. There was just this feeling just saying, you can keep going, just do it for like 1 minute longer, and then 1 minute later I would just like be doing the same thing.
If things come easy to someone, then they will never have that fighting spirit. Now she gives hope to anyone that anything and everything is possible if you put your mind to it.
Do I have to?
Yes, you do have to. Okay. Go and grab some juice to take with it. You don't like seeing your children being diagnosed with anything and then having to be medicated.
It's chronic recurring multifocal osteomyelitis. Chromo, they call it for short. The body thinks there's infections in the bones, but there's not, so it's fighting these infections that aren't there and eating away at the bones. Here, you little girl.
Yeah, I guess it was a bit of a shock to them to know that their child was different in a way. And it was, yeah, just a bit scary, I guess.
Chromo does have a lot of pain in it. She does grit her teeth. She pushes her way through it.
I'm recommended not to do high impact sports, so not much running or jumping.
Being told, oh, okay, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, and then to turn around and find a sport that she could actually float in the air basically is amazing to watch.
My name's Sarah Yates. I'm 13 years old and I'm an indoor skydiver. When I first tried iFly, it was amazing. You just were in the air and the wind blowing on your face was really nice. It was just so fun and exhilarating. And before I started flying, I was really small and underweight, and when I started this sport, I got heaps of muscle back and I was starting to be more like the other kids.
It's been very therapeutic for Sarah because she's doing something that she can be good at, not being left behind.
There's still a couple of tricks that before I do them I'm like, oh, okay, I'm a little bit worried about this, but here goes nothing.
And the coach said she's got potential, so next thing she's competing and she's going really well at it.
And
I went over to Seattle in December 2016 and I came fourth in that competition. It was just an amazing feeling to know that I was up there with some of the adults.
As someone who only started 12 months ago, she's pushing herself and trying to make the best out of whatever direction her life takes her to.
It was a bit of a silver lining because if I didn't have this condition, I probably would never have got into the sport of iFly. My condition isn't holding me back at all.
I'm in a wheelchair because I have low muscle tone and hypermobility, which is a condition that affects me from the waist down. My legs turn 180 degrees backwards. As a teenager, I guess in school was the hardest part. Of course, there's going to be bullying involved, and there was a fair bit of that. But as you get older, you learn to cope with it. It still gets a bit annoying having stairs and stuff, but you just don't take notice anymore. The limitations I noticed, more or less the social limitations. It wasn't so much physical. Constantly able-bodied people will say, no, you can't do that, you're in a wheelchair, or oh, that's too dangerous. And I reckon it should be more or less letting people discover their own limits, not putting them in cotton wool and be like, no, you can't do that. My name's Timothy Lachlan, I'm 20 years old and I ride wheelchair motocross. When I first went to the skate park, I got a lot of stares from people. But I didn't really take notice because I was just like, oh, this is, you know, a cool new environment. What I love about WCMX the most is just the freedom it gives me. It gives me more confidence getting around obstacles in day-to-day life. I'm the first Australian to successfully land a wheelchair backflip, and I did that at Monster Skate Park around about this time last year.
well, I couldn't believe it at first. I mean, it's pretty crazy. I was in awe.
It just shows that you can get through anything through the power of will.
With WCMX, I just want to expand the sport here in Australia, getting a bunch of kids in wheelchairs into the skate park and showing them what they can do. The way I look at it, a wheelchair is just another toy. It's like a bike or a skateboard. Don't let your wheelchair define you. It doesn't have to be something that holds you down.
Yeah, I definitely think that some people might put a mental limitation on their abilities.
If another young kid had something wrong with them, then I would just say, just give it a go, try your best and just keep going.